right. All right, everybody. I think we're ready to roll. Welcome to some new people in the room. Moishe, are you new also?
I've been here once before.
You're relatively new. And Karen and Eric are sort of new as well. So welcome, welcome. And everyone else, you're old. No.
I truly am.
All right.
Today.
You what?
I'm 5 years today.
Wow. Wow, mazel tov.
I can't take the date.
Let me just say, for those who don't know, we're in a new space, which is very exciting. We left the Romemu Center across the way, across the street, because we sold it. And now we have offices at the Jewish Theological Seminary, which are beautiful, and where I went to school, so that's kind of interesting. And we're now based in the church for services. So I just wanted to give people that sort of spatial orientation. And now we're ready to go with the blessing for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, source of all wisdom and revelation, who has sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to soak in your words of Torah. Okay, with that, we are learning today. Wow, it's really noisy from back there, right?
Sound checking.
They're sound checking it. All right, we'll have to deal with that. If there are any sound problems, please let me know. I'm going to be doing some like neck exercises throughout. So today, we're doing the Eglah Arufah, which we've done before. It's the case of of finding a corpse, a body which has clearly been murdered, and not knowing who the murderer was, and the ritual that ensues. And I think it'll become clear as we go on, why this came to mind for this parsha. For some reason, I'm always drawn to this passage. There are other interesting passages that we'll talk about later. Real interesting in services, but it's really been informed by the tragedy of the IDF finding 6 hostage bodies that were murdered. And all around the tragedy of war, where there, so many people are killed and you don't always know how or why, right? That tragedy and what that does to our world, what the fact of that tragedy does to our world. So I was really interested in this idea, which I didn't know a lot about, like I've heard about over the years, of resacralization. So the idea, and I'm sure there's someone here who knows more about it than I do, and you're welcome to jump in if you do. It's the idea that throughout history, human beings have gone from a world that was imbued with sanctity to towards secularization, right? To living in a world that's, not imbued with holiness. And what religion does at its best is re-imbue the world with holiness. At its worst, it certainly doesn't. And I want to look at that idea and then look at how the passages that we'll be examining today sort of speak to those themes. Okay, so again, I just want to say right up front, full transparency, I'm not an expert in this at all. These are just concepts that are calling to me at this moment as one way to respond to the horror that is happening both environmentally and in terms of war and violence. Okay, light fair, right? Light stuff? Ready? Welcome.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Good job, good job.
Find your seats. So I just did a kind of introduction. We're doing Shoftim, and we're specifically looking at the case of finding a body that was murdered and not finding the murderer, and the idea of resacralization of the earth, or of nature, or of the world.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning, Doctor. And we have several psychiatrists.
Any other psychiatrists?
Yeah, I better watch it.
Oh, my goodness.
And God knows who's online. Okay, so I'm going to ask for a reader to begin with. This is all English. The first paragraph is actually from Wikipedia. Anyone here feel like reading? Yeah, go ahead. Karen.
Resacralization
Yeah, but do it loud.
is a term used in environmental philosophy to describe the process of restoring the sacred quality of nature.
Can people online hear? No.
Yes, lightly.
Resacralization of nature is a term used in environmental philosophy to describe the process of restoring the sacred quality of nature. The primary assumption is that nature has a sanctified aspect that has become lost in modern times as a result of the secularization of contemporary worldviews. These secular worldviews are said to be directly responsible for the spiritual crisis in modern man, which has ultimately resulted in the current environmental degradation. This perspective emphasizes the significance of changing human perceptions of nature through the incorporation of various religious principles and values that connect nature with the divine.
Wow. So we have a wow from the room. That's excellent. And so this philosopher, theologian, Persian from Iran, Syed Hossein Nasr, is considered to be, the founder of some of these ideas, although we'll see that they're already embedded in the Torah in a certain way.
And in John Muir.
And in John Muir, and Walt Whitman, maybe we could say, right? Totally. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but
Wildly in Walt Whitman's.
wildly in Walt Whitman, but it takes like a certain. This philosophy takes like a very explicit approach, to these concepts. So, I'm just going to read his two quotes. It is the secularized worldview that reduces nature to a purely material domain cut off from the world of the spirit, to be plundered at will for what is usually called human welfare, but which really means the illusory, this is interesting, satisfaction of a never-ending greed without which consumer society would not exist. Right? The world of the spirit to be plundered at will. Next one, nature has been already sacralized by the sacred itself. In other words, nature is in itself sacred. There's nothing we have to do to nature to make it sacred. It's not a matter of seeing nature as sacred. It is sacred, and if we just uncover our eyes, we would recognize that. And its re-sacralization means more than anything else, a transformation within human beings who themselves have lost their sacred center, so as to be able to rediscover the sacred and consequently to behold again nature's sacred quality. Okay, so that's my opening gambit. And we're going to go right to, unless there are comments, I don't see any yet. We're going to go right to the beginning before we get to our Parsha. Right? And this sense of what happens in the garden, which you can feel when you read the garden story, that there's this luminosity, right? There's this sacred, palpable sacred energy in the garden, and that human beings are not able to sustain, perhaps, one way of looking at the story, that level of sanctity. So let's look at this idea of cursing and what it means. So as a result of Adam and Chava eating from the tree, right, Adam and Eve eating from the tree, part of the punishment is the following in Genesis 3:17. Ula Adam amar ki shamata lekol ishtecha. So to Adam, God said, because you listened to the voice of your wife, v'tochal min ha'etz asher siviticha le'mor lo tochel. Lo tochal mimena. And you ate from the tree that I told you and I commanded you, don't eat from it. The earth, arura ha'adama, the earth will be cursed, ba'avurecha, because of you. Be'itzavon tochlena kol yemei chayecha. By hard labor, or maybe even in sadness or in grief, shall you eat of it all the days of your life. So what is this concept of being cursed? What does it mean that the ground is cursed? So one could say, or one understanding of this, I don't know, how much is the noise from next door getting in the way of the Zuma gods listening?
We hear it. It's not pleasant.
I hear it.
Okay, if you
Usually
can't hear me, what?
I could still hear you totally fine. I do
Okay.
hear the echoes of it. I
Okay.
did already message the group and said, hey, like, I know there's sound checking happening, but it is loud and it's getting in the way. So a little bit. So
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So
course.
if you can't hear me, I'll repeat. I'm sure it's going to get worse in a few minutes. So one understanding of curse is being like stripped of God's protection, right? And you could see, like, blessing is sort of in the garden. Everything, the fruit, everything is there for their taking, and now there has to be this hard work, right? There's toil in order to get the fruits of the ground. Okay, any other thoughts on this before we move on to a little bit more cursing? Or that idea?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that when you toil
Yeah,
and the ground being cursed, you're setting up a dichotomy
yeah,
rather than what preceded this, which was a more unified feeling.
It was more
of nature.
organic, yeah.
More organic, right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Part and parcel of this, rather than in conflict and in opposition to.
yes, I think that's a good word. Now there's opposition somehow between the ground and human beings. You gotta kind of almost fight the earth for what you need. And there's a grief there. It's interesting because the translation is by hard labor shall you, but itzavon is clearly grief, and clearly sadness. I looked for Asher Chaim to shake his head on that. He's our resident linguist. So there's a grief in losing that connection to the earth. And I don't know how you've all felt like this, the experience of witnessing the destruction of nature in our times. Is that a palpable grief? I have to answer that right now. Is that? And how much do we want to feel that grief? And how much do we just not want to know? I find that conflict within myself between grief and just not wanting to know because it's just too scary and too grief-filled. I don't always want to feel grief, right? Okay, next. Story of Cain and Abel. Asher Chaim, do you feel like reading? And then pause when we get to the bolded parts. So the first story of what happens outside of the garden to Adam and Chava's children, right, is a murder. It's a murder. So talk about being stripped of blessing. Tony, do you need something?
There's some coffee or tea.
We're not allowed to eat or drink in here. I know.
Since when?
Since today.
Okay.
Starting today. It's very sad. Hi, Alex.
Drinking, but don't know.
It's very sad.
Back in the time of Cain and Abel, we were allowed.
I'll see. I'm advocating for something else, but so far, back in the time of Cain
Can
and
I
Abel.
ask a question now that it's an
Amy,
interruption?
please.
No questions asked.
And this
Alex,
comes from my own
You
reference.
just came and you're in charge already. I know you are.
He's in charge of tilting.
I'm teasing you too. Yeah.
Is this whole Adam and Eve, I just wonder from my reference points, the sort of split between like the ocean and wave, like the totality of consciousness versus the individual expression of consciousness. Is there like a connection in the Bible
So
to
you never
that
asked.
Eastern?
Well, I love what you're saying. I love the movement too, but I'm not totally getting the question.
So, as someone who studied
Eastern philosophy.
Eastern philosophy, the whole premise is that there's one big everything, and then there's the expression of the individual, which is divine play of
Yes.
knowing oneself through the difference.
Yeah.
And so the earth is in harmony, and then the human comes and differentiates
Yes.
himself
Yes.
from the totality, and
Yes.
then the dance ensues.
Yeah, so the dance here, how beautiful, is between the individuals and their relationship to the totality, and specifically the relationship to the garden as sophisticated human beings and losing that organic connection. You know, that song, We Have to Get Back to the Garden by,
We are,
Crosby, Stills,
Joni
and
Mitchell.
No, Joni Mitchell.
wrote it.
right, it's like, it's that sense, like,
Yeah.
wow, yearning for that garden that we lost, like yearning for that garden.
Thank goodness we also recognize we are Stardust.
Beautiful.
and gold.
Beautiful. Okay. Now back to Asher Chaim for the next story.
ויאמר קין אל הבל אחיו. Cain spoke to Hevel his brother. ויהי בהיותם בשדה, and when they were in the field, ויקום קין אל
Wait a second. Hold on, Asher
אחיו.
Chaim. Caroline, is there any way to make him louder? Because we got a lot of competition.
That's unfortunately, I can't control the output volume of another person on Zoom.
Asher Chaim, can you make yourself louder?
I could try to lean in, I guess.
Lean in. Lean into the Torah, Asher Chaim.
ויאמר קין אל הבל אחיו. Cain said to his brother Hevel, ... ויהי בהיותם בשדה, and when they were in the field, ויקום קין אל הבל אחיו ויהרגהו. Cain arose against Hevel his brother and killed him.
Okay, explain for a moment the ...
It suggests that he said something, but there ain't nothing in there recording the conversation.
What did Cain say? What were Cain's last words to his brother before he killed him? Right, so there's midrash about that, but we're not focusing on that today. Go ahead.
ויאמר אדוני אל קין, Hevel achicha. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Cain, where is Hevel your brother? Vayomer lo yadati. And he said, I don't know. Hashomer achi anochi. Am I my brother's keeper?
Right, and the answer, of course, is yes, he is. And he's abdicated his responsibility.
Vayomer me asita. And he said, what have you done? Kol demei achicha so'achim elai min ha'adama. The voice of the bloods of your brother call out, scream out to me from the earth.
So this is really interesting. It's the earth bearing witness to the murder, right? The blood, right? The blood of your brother is calling out to me from the earth. So the earth is somehow in partnership with God.
The Shekinah.
What?
The Shekinah.
The Shekhinah.
However, how she said.
Yeah.
What she said.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm
go
wondering
on.
if Everett Fox manages to tie in Adama with Adam in his translation.
I'm pretty sure that Everett Fox translates Adam as earthling and Adama as earth. So yes. Right, so they are very much connected.
Have to be on your right, as usual.
Can you pass another for Tomas? Here, this is the frame, these are the ideas. Absolutely, so there's this play here of Dam, blood, Adam, earthling, and Adama, earth, right? They're all sort of, playing with sound and also meanings. Go on, Asher Chaim.
Centering around the root for redness also.
Oh, yes, and the root for redness, which comes to play in the story of Esav as well.
Ve'ata, and now, arur ata min ha'adama, asher pasta et piha laqachat et dimei achicha miyadecha. You are cursed from the Adama, the ground that opened her mouth to receive the bloods of your brother from your hand.
So not only now is the ground cursed, but Cain himself is cursed. And you'll see in a minute that it makes total sense to understand that as stripped of God's protection. Go on.
כי תעבוד את האדמה, לא תוסף כוחך לך. When you work the earth, it will no longer give her strength to you.
So more like intensified cursing at this moment.
נע ונד תהיה בארץ. Wanderer, two different flavors of wandering, you will be in the earth. Different word for earth, aretz instead of adama. Vayomer Cain el Adonai, gadol avoni minso. Cain said to Yud-He Vav-He, my sin is too great a burden for me to bear.
I can't carry my sin. It's too much. I literally can't bear it. I don't know if you've ever felt that, and maybe in this time of Elul, the month of Rosh Hashanah, it's worth making a note about it. It's like, you just feel like your sins or your burdens, your relational burdens, really weigh you down.
Translation note that JPS translates it, my punishment is too great to bear.
No, right.
As in the result of my sin is too great to bear, but the original Hebrew is avoni, my sin.
Correct.
Continue.
Yes.
Hen gerashta oti hayom me'al pnei ha'adama umipanecha esater v'hayiti na' v'nad ba'aretz v'haya kol mot'i yahargeni. Behold, you have exiled me today from the face of the earth, and from your face can I hide? I will be a wanderer, different kind of wanderer in the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me.
So note that Cain has lost two forms of connection. From the face, disconnected from the face of the earth, right? As a wanderer, he's no longer rooted, and from God's face. And has become a kind of exiled person.
Vayomer lo Adonai, lachein kol horeg Cain shiv'atayim yukam, vayasem Adonai leCain ot, levilti hakot oto kol motzao. Yud-He Vav-He said to him, indeed, if anyone kills Cain, vengeance against them shall be sevenfold. Yud-He Vav-He placed a special sign for Cain so that anyone who found him would not strike him.
So even though Cain is cursed, and in a sense without God's protection, God has doubled back and given him some protection. Right? That's
Scroll
God's...
up, please.
What?
Scroll up.
Oh, that is some compassion. No, we're not there yet. Right there. It's perfect.
What does curse mean in the Bible?
So I think curse means stripped of God's blessing and stripped of God's protection.
So they're letting us know that that can happen if you screw up really bad.
Correct.
Except they're letting us know that there's some way in which it's not a full deal. Okay. How do you say his name?
Cain or Cain?
Cain or Cain?
Cain, yeah. Go ahead. And it also relates to God. Even after God punishes Adam and Chava, he makes them clothes. Like even after
He makes them clothes?
Yeah, even after they eat from the forbidden tree, right? He makes them little skirts of fig leaves.
And yet we're told here that he loves us with an unending love.
He does.
Is there a
How do you-
contradiction? Is there a contradiction?
Absolutely.
First and unending love? I guess tough. I guess if you start to think of like really tough love, I guess not.
Or maybe that there are consequences consequences on this earth for our action. And that's part of the love deal. And it's part of the
And
unfortunate
maybe
part of
that's
life's
our
that
own
one.
self-punishment.
Yeah.
that we
And maybe
project
that's our own
ourselves.
self-punishment. Okay, I just want to finish this passage, and since a lot of people in the room have been speaking, see if anyone on Zoom would like to speak.
I would like to speak. I don't know how to raise my hand, but I
Okay,
would.
1 second, Alina, let's finish the passage, and we're going to go to you. You don't have to raise your hand, we got you. Okay, let's go back to Asher Chaim to finish the passage. And then we're going to read one small English passage, and then Alina, we're turning to you.
Okay, good.
Little sidebar about later details of who gets to kill a murderer and judicial process. The only people who would be around who could kill him would be his parents, the Avengers of the Blood. And here the sign is to protect him. Vayese Qayin milifnei Adonai, vayeshev be'eres nod hidmat Eden. Qayin left the presence of Yud-He Vav-He and paradoxically settled down in the land of wandering, Nod, east of Eden.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, next passage, and then we're going to turn to Alina. This is from Everett Fox, and it's funny that Asher Chaim just mentioned him. This is Everett Fox. Everett Fox's commentary, Bible scholar who published a beautiful translation of the 5 books of Moses in 1995. One may observe significant links to the garden story from the Cain and Abel story. Once again, human beings are given a choice. Once again, disregarding the warning leads to death and estrangement from God. And once again, the primal bond between humanity and the soil is ruptured, is why I put this here. Chapter 3 is directly recalled by the use of specific wording. God echoes the curse he had put on the woman in his warning to Cain, and where is Hevel, your brother, brings to mind, where are you, which had been addressed to Cain's father. So that existential question, and also the sense of being cursed, the earth being cursed, and Cain being cursed. And then again, the earth, it feels like the curse on the earth has been intensified after Cain kills his brother. So that primal bond ruptured, right, echoes this idea of desacralization of the earth. Right, we keep losing our connection to the earth and to God. Okay, Alina, on to you.
Well, I don't know if it was Tony or someone else said, love by an unending love. Like, you can't lose your protection from God. I don't think that's, I just feel like that's some human idea.
Amen, sister.
About that. I get stuck on something like this. Not to say that there shouldn't be punishment or whatever, but there's something here that doesn't sit well with me anyway. I don't.
So maybe let's put it in different words, and I'm just thinking out loud with you. So the punishment in terms of the earth is that human beings have to labor and labor in, it becomes difficult, it becomes grief-filled. Like nothing in the world is easy as it was in the garden, and that's experienced as a kind of curse.
Okay.
Does that sit better?
It sits somewhat better. Yes, thank you. Somewhat.
And remember, right, if we assume that human beings wrote this book and it's divinely inspired, which is my presumption, then it reflects something about our experience. So what about human experience is it reflecting?
Yes, and also it reflects human interpretation of things. Yeah.
Correct. Exactly.
Okay.
So it can sit well with your experience, it can resonate with your experience or not. My approach to the Torah is I keep trying to sort of find where my connection is in my experience to what the Torah is saying.
Yeah, yeah.
And make sense of it in that way. And sometimes I know, sometimes I can't, and sometimes I reject it. Right here, this feels very resonant to me.
It feels very resonant to you?
It does.
Yeah.
Not the idea of cursing like literally, but having lost our connection to the garden, having exploited the earth, having lost that sense of sanctity, yes, I think that's the world we live in. That feels very resonant to me.
But even when you think about the Garden of Eden, is that on this plane anyway? Really, I don't know.
Question.
Hold on. Maybe it was once. I don't know.
It's in Persia somewhere, no?
It's in Persia somewhere.
That's another
Yeah,
question.
yeah, okay. Tony, hold on, I'm gonna go to people who haven't spoken yet. Okay, Eric, and then Elliot. The E's around the room. Go ahead.
So, I
Hold on one second. Caroline, can you stop screen sharing for a minute? So we can
Yes,
see
I
people?
can.
Thank you so much. Let me just put this on gallery. Okay, now we're one room. Hopefully there's not too much noise from the next room. Go ahead, Eric.
so I was reading Rav Kook, my favorite, and,
One of my favorites too, yeah.
oh, good.
Yeah.
And he was talking about desacralization of the earth. Well, that was his big thing, of course, going back to Israel, but also in terms of our own physicality being part of the earth. That we've not only separated ourselves from the earth, but we've separated our souls from our physicality.
We're disembodied.
We're
Our souls don't
disembodied.
have a place to rest.
Right,
Yeah.
and the goal is to reintegrate our own bodies with our own spirituality.
Yeah, absolutely. And to just expand on that a little bit, you know, if you look at half of Exodus and also Leviticus, right, the whole goal, you know, of liberation of slaves from Egypt is so that the Israelites can build a home for God amongst them. And that is called the Mishkan, the place where God dwells. And as Tony was saying before, the Shekhinah is that aspect of God that dwells amongst us. And many compare the body and the soul as a kind of Mishkan, as a kind of sanctuary for God's dwelling. And those are images of integration as well. So are we embodied? Are we embodied? Are we connected to our souls? Are we connected to God? Is that a lived experience, not just an idea?
Right. And is our own physicality sacred?
And is our own, that's exactly what these texts are going to be about.
Okay.
Is our physicality sacred? And when is it sacred and how is it sacred? Beautiful, thank you. Elliot.
Yeah, so I'm interested in, this notion of commandment
Yeah.
and then disobeying
Yes.
commandment, and then what happens
Yes.
when you disobey a commandment.
Yeah,
And so this is very clear, Adam and Eve disobeyed.
out of the garden,
Done, right?
done, out.
Okay. And so here we are, okay, and, we know, okay, from our studying, what God commands us, among other things, to observe Shabbat.
Yes.
Right? So for Jews who observe Shabbat, right? That's one group. And then there are Jews who don't observe Shabbat. I mean, they're not following the commandment.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So what does that mean? What does that mean?
Okay, so
Means she has a lot of work to do.
Okay, so I'm more interested in a different understanding of commandment in our times.
Good.
And it's very much informed by Levinas. I'm a scholar of Levinas. But for instance, Levinas says the command issues from the face of the other. I'm going to give two examples of command right now.
Okay.
In other words, if I'm really connected to you, I'm not going to kill you, God forbid, because I understand that you're a human being created in God's image. I might not have that rational understanding. I might not have that language, but I get the fullness I experience the fullness of your sanctity. Here's another example, which has guided me for many years. So when I was pregnant with my first child, I signed up for this thing called Bradley Method. And there, like I wrote like a 10-page birth plan that went right out the window since labor plans ensued. But I'll never forget, one of the husbands in the room when we were talking about giving birth said, the situation commands. And I also believe the earth commands. Like, what is commanding us? When I'm feeling like something in me is being sort of not respected by someone else, that's like very visceral to me. When I'm seeing someone else not respect someone else, I feel like a command is being violated. So how do we feel commands in our time?
Okay.
Does that work?
It works, okay, but it
So I don't take it literally command.
Okay, and
It's still
so,
so small voice.
no, I hear what you're saying.
Still small voice, beautiful,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I hear what you're saying, but the implication of that, okay, is that, and I'm not arguing, that we should follow this, okay, but the implication is, the commandments, as we understand them, one of which is clearly, I'm just using this as an example, you shall observe Shabbat,
Clearly.
okay? And so that doesn't fall within your sort of understanding of commandment.
Well, it does on a different level. Let's think about what Shabbat is. Resting, letting human beings rest. It's Shabbat is the institution that is the counterforce to slavery. It says that we shall give our animals rest, our servants rest. So everything about Shabbat is crucial.
Right?
It's just that I don't need it to be observed in the ways certain communities interpret that it should be observed.
Right.
Okay, so okay, I will leave it here. Okay, because it's not, because what you're saying basically is, because there are various,
I'm talking like a renewal Jew.
Right,
Right.
right,
Even though I was trained at JTS.
right. Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does.
It's a different approach.
A different understanding. Yep.
Okay, all right. Tony, and then we're gonna go back to the text.
So where it gets a little more complicated and mystical and maddening, literally
Yeah.
and figuratively.
Okay. What, this idea of command or something else?
Well, it's connected to the thing of command. It's connected to all this, which is, as our teacher puts it, our teacher, Krishnamurti, puts it, you are the world and the world is you. So if my psyche, individual psyche, is connected to the whole earth and the whole world, the whole universe, then synchronistically things get really wiggy. If I start to go kind of crazy and off the reservation, the world follows as a shadow. And vice
What are you
versa.
responding to in the room right now? I'm understanding your
Partly
point.
the question, where's the command come from? It comes from every which way because the world and each of our psyches is one.
I see.
It's not-
Yes, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I wake up in the morning and think, okay, what do I have to do? But it's like, what do I have to do is my to-do list. But there's also something bigger, like what obligations are driving me? Okay, Sarah.
Quick thought.
Yeah.
When I heard Cain on the one hand saying, my punishment is unbearable, and then here it heard God saying, you're just going to live now. I'm like, oh, that actually feels like, first of all, it feels cruel as opposed to, that was my first instinct. It feels cruel as opposed to beneficent because God is saying, I'm not going to wipe this away. And you have to live with the consequences. And I think that for me, the whole issue of commands here is connected to consequences and relationship to the earth and to others that we cannot escape.
And who do we hold accountable?
Exactly.
It reminds me of that horrible high school shooting where the father has just been arrested, right? For giving his son and, I don't know, what is it? AR-15.
Yeah.
Right, so who's accountable?
Who's accountable?
And I also think, and someone wrote about this in the New York Times, not only the father is responsible, the entire society is responsible. And we're gonna get to that. Okay, give me a time check, because I don't have the time.
It is 9:25 a.m.
Excellent. Okay, we gotta go forward with it. We gotta get to our parsha. Okay. All right. Asher Chaim, back to you if you would. So now we're in number 5, and this is the parsha.
כי ימסה חלל באדמה, אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך לרשתך, נופל בשדה, לא נודע מהכהו. If there be found a corpse in the Adama, the land, the earth that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, your God, gives you to inherit her, fallen in the field, and it is not known who struck him. ויסעו זקניך ושופטיך, ומרדו את הערים אשר סביבות החלל. The elders and your elders and your judges shall go out and measure to the towns that are around the corpse. והיה העיר הקרובה אל החלל, and whichever town is closest to the corpse, ולקחו זקני העיר ההיא עגלת בקר אשר לא עובד בה, אשר לא משכה בעול. The elders of that city or that town shall take a heifer from the herd, one who has not been used for work and has never pulled a plow.
Okay, stop there for 1 second. So this is really interesting, and I feel like I'm channeling Tomas a little bit. So the first thing that happens after a corpse is found is measurement, right? That's really interesting. Space, but they're desperately looking for accountability, right? So which town is closest? So let's start there. So proximity is important, right? Proximity is important. Okay, and the next thing is a heifer which has not been, one could say, civilized yet, never worked, never pulled in a yoke, right? A heifer in its raw form. Okay, go on.
והורידו זקני העיר ההיא את העגלה אל נחל איתן אשר לא יעבד בו ולא יזרע, וערפו שם את העגלה בנחל. And the elders of that town shall take the heifer to a wasteland wadi that is not worked and is not seeded, and there they shall arfu, break the neck of the heifer in the wadi.
So again, the wadi is not tilled or sown. So again, it's this, nature in its wild form, right? Not yet touched by human hands, not tamed, not civilized.
Isn't that Eden?
That's really interesting. It's not a garden, but that might be related to Eden. I think that's really interesting. And, the neck of this heifer is broken. And note, because this will become important later, no blood has been spilled, right? The heifer is killed by breaking its neck, which is different than a korban, different than a sacrifice. Okay, go on.
Yeah, it's the radical opposite of a sacrifice.
It's the radical opposite because you need dam, you need blood in a sacrifice. Is that why you're saying it's the radical opposite?
It's the back of the neck instead of the front of the neck, and it's not returning the blood to the earth or to God, but as you pointed out, bloodless. Yeah.
Yeah.
V'nirgashu ha-kohanim b'nei Levi, kivam bahar Adonai Elohecha l'sharato, ulevarech b'shem Adonai, ve'al pihem yiyeh kol riv v'chol naga. The Kohanim, the officiants, shall come forward, they being the descendants of Levi, because they are the ones whom Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, your God, chose out to serve God and to bless in the name of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and it is by their mouths that all disputes and damages shall be resolved. V'chol ziknei ha'ir hahi haqrovim el halal yerchetzu et yedehem al ha'egla ha'arufa b'nahal. And the elders of that town that is closest to the corpse shall wash their hands above the heifer whose neck has been broken in the wadi.
You'll see in a minute that in a sense they're washing their hands of the crime, right? It's not their crime, but they need to say so. Go ahead.
Ve'anu ve'amaru, and they shall respond and say, Yadeinu lo shaphu et adam hazeh. Our hands did not spill this blood. Ve'einenu lo ra'u, nor did our eyes see anything.
So this is a statement of no accountability. We didn't do this, but it's essential that they say so. Right? There's this murder. We don't know who the murderer is. And some ritual of accountability has to take place, even if in that ritual, there's a statement of where it's not our fault.
The paradox, some are guilty, all are responsible. They are taking a corporate liability, as it were.
Yeah, the collective is responding, and in some sense is like showing up to be responsible, even if they're not directly to blame. Yeah.
כפר לעמך ישראל, אשר פדית אדוני, ואל תיתן דם נקי בקרב עמך ישראל, ונכפר להם הדם. Atone or cover over for your nation Israel, whom you redeemed, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and do not place innocent blood in the midst of your people Israel. V'nikaper, is this part still part of, yeah, after the quote, and thus the blood shall be atoned for them. V'ata tiva'er haddam hanaqi miqirbecha ki ta'aseh hayashar b'einei Adonai. And you shall remove innocent blood from your midst, if when you do that which is upright in the eyes of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh.
So I was really interested in this passage in the role of the heifer who's not yet been tamed by human beings, and the role of the wadi that has not yet been civilized in any form or manner. So it's almost like nature has a hand, so to speak, in cleansing the earth of this crime, right? Because as we saw before, when blood is spilled, the earth itself becomes polluted. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Really short.
Yeah, Rob.
The word corpse,
Yeah, halal, we're gonna get into that in a minute.
but does that refer to murder, or it could be anyone that dies between the two towns?
So a halal can be any kind of corpse. The reason we know it's a murder, it says lo noda mihigahu. We don't know who murdered him. We don't know who killed him. Okay, so let's go to that word corpse. That's the next
Isn't a
passage.
dead body a mace?
What?
Dead body is a mace?
A mate.
Right, mate.
That's another word.
And how is the word mate different than, it's,
So let's look at halal. That's the question. So halal is really interesting because it means, as you can see, slain, fatally wounded, pierced, right? And also profaned. So there's something about halal that's pierced, or we'll see in a minute, or emptied of God's sacred energy. Right, emptied somehow of God's sacred energy. And if you look at Leviticus 19:12, v'lo tish'avu b'shmi lashaka, you shall not swear falsely by my name, profaning v'chilalta et shem Elohecha ani Adonai, profaning the name of your God, I am the Lord. And I'm going to read this commentary by Rabbi Asher Brander. The key word here is chol, which connotes mundane. So chol is like secular, right? Mundaneness or profanity in the realm of time and matter. It appears that the simple form of the word chol, chulin, merely speaks of a de facto state of the ordinary, while the alliterative double lamed, like halal or chilul, connotes a profaning of pre-existing sanctity. So halal, a corpse, means an image of God which has been profaned in the form of a human being. Equally clear is the notion that whenever we speak of chol, sanctity, kedusha, is lurking in the shadows. That one of the gravest sins is called chilul Hashem, profaning the name of God. For commensurate to the degree of sanctity is the depth of profanity. Is it not interesting to consider that the word for a human corpse in the Torah is called halal, implying a vacating of the great sanctity that is humanity? Right? And Eric brought up before, in our day-to-day life, are we actually integrating that great sanctity in our bodies? Right? Is that a presence that we live with? Is that a presence that we can even tolerate? Okay, let's go on. Just seeing if there are any questions in the Zoom-a-gog. Yes, Beth.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
One of the interesting translations that Evelyn Fox has for this passage we just read regarding the hand washing over the corpse of the heifer and, seeking to not have innocent blood. He says, so shall they be atoned of the blood, and so shall you yourself burn out the innocent blood from your midst. For you are to do what is right in the eyes of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Burn out the innocent blood from your midst. I have no idea what that means.
I think it's an intense way of saying getting rid of. That's my sense. I don't have another comment about that. Sorry. Okay, we're gonna go on. So I'm gonna skip a little bit because I think we are limited in time. Well, actually, I'm gonna go to the next passage and then we're gonna skip. So the Mishnah on this is really fascinating. Mishnah Sotah. If you go down a little bit, Caroline, yep, go down. Yes, perfect, okay. So, it says, Ziknei otah ha'ir, rochatzin ayideihem b'mayim b'makom arifah shel eglah ve'omrim. The elders of the city would then wash their hands in the water in the place of the breaking of the neck of the heifer, and then they would recite, Yadeinu lo shafchu et hadam hazeh ve'einenu lo ra'u. Our hands did not spill this blood, nor did our eyes see. And then they expand now from the Torah. V'chi al da'atenu alta sheziknei beit din shafchei damim. So the Mishnah asks a question. Did it enter our minds that the elders of the court are spillers of blood, that they must make such a declaration? Like, why does the Torah have these elders make this declaration? Rather, Ella, shelo va liadenu ufitarnuhu below mazon. Rather, they mean to declare that the victim did not come to us and that we let him take his leave without food. And we did not see him and then leave him alone to depart without accompaniment. Below ra'inuhu v'hanachnuhu below levaya. So like a guest came to our town or a stranger came to our town. Did we abandon him or did we take care of him? V'hakohanim omrim kafer la'amcha Yisrael asher padita Hashem va'al titen dam naki b'kara amcha Yisrael lo yisruchim lomar v'nikaper lahem hadam ela ruach hakodesh mivsartan imatai shetase kacha hatam nikaper lahem. And the priests recite, forgive, Lord, your people Israel, whom you have redeemed, and suffer not innocent blood to remain in the midst of your people Israel. They did not have to recite the conclusion of the verse, and the blood shall be forgiven for them, as this is not part of the priest's statement, but rather the divine spirit informs them. When you shall do so, the blood is forgiven for you. So in other words, when you have made this declaration, and also declared that you haven't abandoned this person so that this person was not without protection in your town, then the blood is forgiven for you. So this speaks to the communal responsibility and the systems at play, as Tony was talking about and as Amy also was talking about. Like what's the whole, right? What's the big picture? You know, if you think back to the high school shooting in Georgia, right? What are the systems in play that made this possible? Right? It's not only about this disturbed young man who was unfortunate to have a terrible family life and years of suffering. It's about something much bigger than that.
Is the assumption in the text, it explicitly says that the murdered person is a stranger, is unknown.
Yeah.
Is the assumption of the text also or rather, sorry, I got it backwards. It's explicit that the murderer is unknown, But
Right, it
does the
says-
text assume that the victim is also unknown to these communities?
Well, I'm
Is
feeling
also a
that
stranger?
that's not an assumption that's explicitly made in the Torah,
Yeah,
but I'm feeling that in the Mishnah.
yeah, that's why I
Right?
asked.
Right, it feels like someone came to town, and did you take care of that person or not?
That's what they're absorbing, right?
What?
The elders are absorbing that. They're saying we did not, we did.
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Like, this did not happen, right? We didn't see him and not take care of him. Okay, so I want to go to the story of Yosef for a moment. And think more about bloodless murders and the connection to this text, which is kind of wild. So we're now in text 14. Okay, so most of us remember what happened to Joseph, right? He was thrown into a pit, and then he was sold into captivity. So even though his brothers thought of killing him, they spilled no blood, right? So it says in Genesis 37 that they saw him from afar, and before he came close to them, they conspired to kill him. I'm just going to kind of quickly go through this so we get to the heart of the matter. And they say, come, let us kill him, throw him into one of the pits, and we can say a savage beast devoured him. But when Reuben heard it, he tried to save him from them. Also, I left out that little line, we shall see what comes of his dreams. Obviously, they're furious at him, they're jealous of him, you know, they have like, their rage is clearly murderous rage. And then Reuben says, let us not take his life. Lo nakenu nafesh. And Reuben went on, shed no blood, right? Al tishpachu dam, yishlicha oto el habor hazeh. Throw him into this pit out in the wilderness, but do not touch him yourselves, intending to save him from them and restore him to his father. So we all know he was sold before Reuben could restore him from his father. And Reuben goes back to the pit and says, the boy is gone, what am I to do? And now here's the blood in 31. Vayichu et ketonet Yosef, vayishchatu se'ir izim v'yitpalu et haketonet b'dam. They took Joseph's tunic, slaughtered a kid, and dipped the tunic in the blood. What a powerful symbol that is, right? The symbol of their jealousy, because their father gave their brother, their younger brother, a coat of many colors, and here they are, they strip him of, that tunic, and they dip it in blood.
Nice family.
Nice family, right? Really nice family. V'yishlchu et ketonet basim v'yaviu el avihim. And they take the ornamented coat with the blood on it, and they take it to the father, and they say, Vayimru zot matzanu hakerna haketonet b'cha hi imlo. And they said, this we found it. Like, we're not responsible, right? You recognize whether this is your son's coat. So they're putting their onus on their father, even though the onus, at least on this level, should not be on their father. Maybe in the bigger picture it should be, because he clearly played favorites. Vayakira. And their father recognized it. Vayomer ketonet benihi. It's my son's coat. Chaya ra'a acharatu. An evil beast ate him. Taraf Yosef. Joseph was torn up by a beast. So their father supplies the lie that they're looking to him to supply. Right? They don't even have to say the lie. They just say, recognize the coat. He recognizes the coat, but not the implications of what's happening in this family. The Yikra Yaakov Simotav, and he rips his clothing as a sign of grief. Vayasam sak b'matnav, and he puts sackcloth on his loins. Vayit'abel al bano yamim rabim, and he grieves for his son many, many days. Vayakumu kol banav v'kol banotav linnachamo. and all his sons and daughters rise up to comfort him. And he refuses to be comforted. Vayomer ki ered adoni avel sha'olah. I'm going to go down to my son in grief in this place called Sheol, which is kind of underworld. Vayef oto aviv. And his father wailed for him.
Roll, please. Thank you.
So what a tragic, right, grief saturated story. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold him to Egypt, to Potiphar, who's a courtier of Pharaoh, and his prefect. Okay, so that's the Joseph story. Now let's see what happens. So Yaakov thinks he's dead for all these many, many years, and presumably Yaakov never, became the same as he was before his son's death, as he believes it. And in fact, when he introduces himself to Pharaoh, he says, "My days have been few and evil." Like, he's a miserable man, right? Because of his son. But then here's what happens. The sons go to Egypt, and then they come back, and they say, it's a long, involved story, which I'm not going to go into now. But the sons find Joseph, and they're looking for food because of famine. They went out from Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. And they say to him, Joseph is still alive. And he's a ruler in all the land of Egypt. And his heart went numb. Because he did not believe him. Could you imagine, after all these years, after losing your child, that someone comes back to you and say, he's alive and he's ruling Egypt, right? But look what happens. Yidabru elav et kol divrei Yosef, and they told him everything Yosef said. Asher diber alehem, that Joseph told them to tell him. V'yar et ha'agalot asher shalach Yosef laset otav. And he saw the wagons that Joseph sent to take him to Egypt. Okay, but meanwhile, a few verses ago, it says that Pharaoh sent those wagons, not Joseph. So that's interesting. V'techi ruach Yaakov avihem, and Jacob's spirit became alive. Vayomer Yisrael Rav od Yosef b'ni chai. My son Joseph is still enough. My son Joseph is still alive. I'm going to see him before he dies. Now here's what the Midrash does, and Rashi quotes the Midrash, which is really interesting. So, we're going to skip this one, and we're going to go to the next one, number 18. In the middle of Rashi, Vayar et hagalot asher shalach Yosef. The beginning of the Rashi. Et kol divrei Yosef. All the words of Joseph. Siman masar lahem b'meh haya osek v'sheferesh mimenu b'parashat egla arufa. So in other words, these wagons were evidence that it was Joseph who was sending a message that he had informed them of the religious subject he had been studying with his father at the time when he left him, the section of the heifer that had its neck broken. All right, so let's take this apart.
It's a little willful.
I know, it's kind of wild. So what's going on here? You know what, let's stop.
How do you tie that?
Let's stop sharing for a moment. Asher Chaim, you want to say something quick before I go on with this?
Yeah. Rabbinic Judaism didn't have a word for intertext, but they're saying there's an intertext between Agalah, moving van, as opposed to Eglah, which is such a rare usage in biblical Hebrew, but here it is, Eglah Arufa.
Beautiful. And I think
what's the clue?
But there's more of an intertext. So what the Midrash is telling us is very far-fetched, right? The Midrash is telling us is that Yaakov sees these wagons and says, Joseph is sending me a clue. We were just studying that before he left. But what is it about this story or these rituals that relates to the Joseph story, right? So for Jacob, there was a corpse without a killer. Right? For Jacob, there was in the form of a coat, there was a murder, but there was no murderer. He didn't know what happened. There was a bloodless murder. And the Egel, right, is killed without blood as well. So there's a murder for which there is no accountability. I think that's what's happening here. Right? So there's a psychological connection. Not only the wagon, the Egel, and then the Egel Arufah, right, that wordplay and that intertext, but there's also a thematic connection, which is there's no accountability.
That's not a stretch.
What?
That's not a stretch.
It's not a stretch?
It's a bit of a stretch.
It's a bit of a stretch. Well, that's how the Midrash stretched the text and sort of interwove things, and it's also fed by the fact that Pharaoh sent the wagons, not Joseph. So Joseph sent the wagons. The rabbis are saying, Joseph sent a message to me. Okay, Elliot.
Just to so, but Jacob thinks that it was a bloody murder.
Jacob does think it was a bloody murder, but in fact, it was a kind of bloodless murder.
In fact, it was, but right.
In fact, it was a bloodless
It wasn't actually a murder.
What?
He died. He wasn't a murderer. He didn't die.
It wasn't a murder, but for Jacob, it was a murder. His son was taken from him. Wait, hold on, everybody. Raise your hands. Okay, Wendy, Tomas, Alex. Good.
One thing that you could see throughout the Torah is the significance that blood symbolizes the life force, not just in people, but in animals as well.
Yes, that's one of the passages we skipped.
Right, and hence you see that with Cain and also in the Parsha Noah.
Correct.
When it says that you should not drink the blood.
Correct.
Even of an animal.
Correct.
And going forward into the temple times, when the animal's blood fell, it was imperative that it be covered up with dirt. And even though it was not a human's blood, it was an animal's blood because it was considered part of the life force and needed to be covered over. And hence, even today in Israel, when somebody dies and they have to recover a body, they have a special team of people that collects even like the tiniest little speck of blood that could be on a
It's
wall.
all considered sacred,
and
absolutely.
They scrape it off and they bury it, even the tiniest little drop of blood, and that continues today in our tradition in Israel.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. Okay, Tomas.
Just trying to look at these mirrors facing each other,
Exactly.
these two stories.
Exactly.
First,
What's the mirror here?
yeah, well, in one you have a body without a name, a stranger. In one you have a body without a name, which is the murdered stranger in the wilderness, and in the case of Joseph, you have the name without the body. You have everything but the girl, is where you have all the evidence of the murder, but not the corpse. But I think also you have an uncertainty as to who is murdered, because if you stay with the text, I think you can make a case that in every way but the literal way, it's Jacob who's murdered, because he has a soul death.
Jacob's life has been stolen from him.
He has a soul death. He goes down to Sheol.
Joseph as a hostage, his life has been stolen from him.
Certainly the life that he intended.
Yes, for sure.
In a strange way, he thrives in prison.
And in Egypt.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
That's true.
In some ways, he's redeemed. But I think the father, Jacob, suffers the living death because the soul goes out of him, the spirit goes out of him. You could even say he's desanguinated, the blood goes out of him, the life force. And
Beautiful.
he goes to the
Beautiful.
underworld, or says he will.
Yes, I think you're right.
And in a way, he dies and is resurrected.
Right, and in both cases, there are murders, maybe here multiple, without accountability. Right, I think that's the profound connection. Right, what happens when a crime is committed and there's no accountability? Yes, Deborah.
Let me ask the obvious question, where's the body? Nobody mentioned the body, nothing.
Where's the body of?
Joseph, nobody even asks the question.
Inside the animal.
Well, inside the animal. Exactly, inside the animal. The animal ate him up. It's like the perfect alibi.
So the school of thought that says there was a sin because, or he was murdered because sin is conceived, the thought. And the thought of the brothers thinking of killing him, that in itself is murder because